And the reality of it is, I'm just gonna be very frank with you, the average pay in the whole United States is, does being a CNA help in nursing school? Hi guys! It has been so long since I filmed a sit-down video, this is kind of weird. Why am I nervous? So today I'm gonna be making a video about becoming a CNA before nursing school. I have been so hesitant to make this video because I feel like there's so much that I want to say and I just don't want to miss anything because I feel like this is so important. I just want it to all make sense and I don't want to sound like an idiot, like a babbling idiot, okay? So because I'm gonna be talking a lot, I'm gonna leave chapters in the bottom so that way you can skip to what you want to skip to and you don't have to hear me blabbing about something that you don't care about. I'm just gonna start from the beginning. I have my iPad here. I have like 4 pages of notes. So if I'm looking over to the side, that's why. We're just gonna go back to the basics. So what is a CNA? A CNA is a certified nurse assistant, but I'm sure you've also heard there's PCTs and there's regular nurse aides. So a PCT, I believe, still has the certification. They can do a little bit more like medical stuff than a CNA. So they could do like phlebotomy stuff if they're trained in that. They can do like EKGs and things like that. An NA or a nurse aide is basically a CNA, but just not certified. So there's a CNA, certified nurse assistant, and then there's a nurse aide, which is not certified, obviously. Most facilities let CNAs and nurse aides do the same thing. From my experience in hospitals and nursing homes, they want nurse aides to eventually get certified, but I know in more like home healthcare settings, they don't really care. It just depends on, obviously, your state. Everybody's different, everywhere is different. At the end of the day, they all do pretty much very similar things. Some do a little more than others, but it's all pretty much the same. For today's video, I'm only gonna be talking about being a CNA, certified nurse assistant. That's what I am, so that's what I'm gonna be talking about. I can't speak on anything else. So I got hired through a company and they provided the class for me. They paid a minimum wage up until the end of the course, and then after that, once I passed, they gave me the regular CNA rate, which I'll get into the pay later. You can find a CNA course independently by yourself, but a lot of companies will just pay to get you certified, so that way they know that you'll be working for them. The company that I worked for, it was free of charge and they actually paid me, so it was nice. I live in Pennsylvania. My course was 4 weeks long, Monday through Friday. I wanna say it was like 8 to 4:30, something along those lines. It was like a full-time job kind of thing. But depending on the program, depending on the company you work for, depending on where you're getting the class, a lot of places will work with your schedule so they can, so say you're working like a full-time job already, they'll do like night classes or something like that. It just depends on where you go. As far as the class itself, it was like a classroom setting. I think there was 4 other students in there. It was obviously during like COVID time, so it was a little weird, but we would be taught the information during the day. And then at the end of each section, there was a test that we had to take. There was a written test and there was a skills test. You had to pass the written test with a 70% to pass, but at least for the program that I was going through, they were very lenient. So if you weren't sure of a question and you asked, you could like really heavily hint. So yeah, that was nice. I know there was someone in our class who, he was just really not a very strong test taker, but he knew the information, he was smart, but he just couldn't sit down in a test setting and take a written test. And the instructor helped him through it a lot. As far as my experience goes, the instructor was lenient with the written test. Now, as far as the skills tests, I wish I still had the book, because the way that it worked in my state, I'm sure it's very similar in other states, is you have a skill and there's steps to each skill. And there's certain steps that you cannot miss or else you fail. If you miss some steps, it's fine, but there's certain like key steps that you cannot miss. So those have to do more so with like patient safety. So let me think of an example. You're repositioning someone, and one of the last steps is lower the bed to its lowest setting. And you forget to do that, but it was highlighted, then you would not pass and you'd have to retake it. The information was very digestible, if that makes sense. It was nothing that was too crazy. It's not like crazy concepts that you have to grasp. It's very like cut and dry. You just have to pay attention. You just have to pay attention. Another thing is the tests were word for word from the book. Again, I don't know if that's how it is for everybody, but if you just looked over the information a couple times and you had it in your head, when you're doing the test, you could almost recognize the information because it wasn't like a critical thinking question, it was just cut and dry. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense at all? So then at the end of the course, when everything was done, there's a final test in the actual course itself. It's basically just a comprehensive test. You have to get a 70% again, and then there's a skills test where she'll give you 3 skills and you have to pass all 3 skills. Once you pass that, you've officially passed the CNA course. You're done with the course. But now you have to take your certification exam. So in Pennsylvania, this includes another written test and another skills test. And it's just like the last exam that you take in the course. As far as what you learn as a CNA and what your job responsibilities are, you do basic patient care. So like bathing patients, assisting them with bathing, repositioning them, dressing them or helping them get dressed, feeding, morning care, mouth care, brushing their teeth, things like that. There's also more medical tasks, I guess you could say. So you learn how to take blood pressure properly, heart rate, respirations, you know, your vital signs, height and weight, applying those anti-embolism stockings, and then just overall monitoring for any abnormalities or deviations from normal in your patient, I guess you could say, just to like make sure nothing's wrong, you know? You also learn how to chart, and then just basic, very, very basic anatomy. So places you can work or who you're gonna be taking care of. Okay, most CNAs, not all, most CNAs work with the elderly or disabled population. Now, I've heard of CNAs working with moms and babies. I've heard of CNAs working in doctor's offices. The possibilities are very broad. You could work in a wide variety of places, but there is a much higher demand for CNAs, nurse aides, PCTs in that population. As far as like where you can work, hospitals, nursing homes, doctor's offices, like I said before. So home care, you can go into someone's home and take care of one individual person. You could also work in like a group home, and you're just basically going into a group home. There's multiple residents who live there. You just take care of them, help them go about their day, things like that. But again, there may be even more options because depending on where you live, like me, I live in the middle of nowhere, so there's not a lot of options. But if you live somewhere like New York City or Atlanta or something like that, there's probably a lot more options for you because there's a lot more facilities. Am I making sense? And there's a very high demand for CNAs because being a CNA is hard work. So the possibilities are not endless, but very vast and broad, okay? Fast forward, so now you're a CNA. What is the schedule like? What's the pay like? The average pay in the whole United States is $15.35 per hour. This varies drastically depending on where you're at, the facility you work out. So it's important to do your research because your time is very important. Don't settle for a job just because they're the first one to give you an offer. Make sure the pay is something that you're comfortable with. So just make sure you do your research first. Okay, so as far as pay and scheduling goes, this varies depending on if you're staff with the hospital or nursing home or whatever, or if you're what's called agency. So I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can. I'm not an expert. I do not work for agency. I'm just gonna do my best. So someone who works for agency, their specific agency will give them a needs list of facilities that need aides that day. They could send you within a certain radius. So they could send you 45 minutes east, they can send you why did I say east and point that way? East would be that way. They can send you 45 minutes east or 45 minutes west or whatever. So the pay is a lot better usually because you are more flexible and you are willing to go wherever they need people the most. Does that make any sense? So I've seen aides who make $35 an hour or more. They make like nurse rates just from being flexible and where they're willing to work that day. There's also travel agencies, which is pretty much the same thing as an agency, but you're just traveling farther. So, and it's usually permanent and for like a certain period of time, if that makes sense. If you're interested in agency, please look it up because I am not an expert. I'm just going by what people who I've worked with have told me and the small amount of research that I have done. So if you're interested in this, please just go do some research. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. But as far as travel agencies go, I'm sure you've heard of travel nurses. Well, there's travel nurse aides too, and they make a lot of money. When it comes to being a travel aide, from what I've seen, they usually send you somewhere, so that could be 8 hours away, 4 hours away, 12 hours away, whatever it is, but you're staying there for a fixed amount of time. So the agency will sign a contract with the facility, and then you're kind of like an employee there for that amount of time. The reason why being a travel aide is so nice is they'll pay for your way there, they'll pay for your food, they'll pay for your housing, wherever that is, whether you're in a hotel, Airbnb, whatever. So they're paying you to live and they're paying you to be an aide. somewhere else. That was so long-winded for no reason. Some travel CNAs I've seen make like $1,000 a week. They make a lot of money. Okay, enough about agency. How scheduling goes as an aide. Usually for most places, they have full-time, part-time, and then casual or PRN, which is basically you pick up whenever you want. But sometimes it's not as simple as that. With casual or PRN, yes, you pick up at your convenience, but some facilities have certain requirements that you have to meet. So you have to work 2 weekends per month, or you have to work 35 hours in a month, or something like that. Some places have no limitations and you just literally pick up whenever you feel like it. It just depends, I was a casual aide whenever I worked at the nursing home, and it was amazing for school because I didn't have to plan ahead about when I would have tests or whatever, or if I was gonna study a certain day. Whenever I had a day off, I would just pick up. So now we'll get into like the work environment as a CNA. For the first week or so, depending on where you're at, they'll put you with a preceptor that you'll observe at first. Then eventually they'll watch you, make sure you're doing everything right. I'm sorry, just burped, excuse me. Eventually you'll be on your own, but the preceptor or someone will be there for you to ask questions and lean on for support and guidance. Your first couple weeks especially, it can feel very overwhelming and stressful, especially if you're in a facility that is lower staffed. And the reality of it is, I'm just gonna be very frank with you, not a lot of people want to work as an aide. So a lot of the time you will find yourself taking care of a lot more patients than you feel comfortable with, or put in certain situations that might stress you out. Like I remember my first couple of days of being an aide, my mouth was so dry because I was so nervous and I was running around like a chicken with his head cut off. Being a CNA, like you all probably know this if you have any interest in being an aide. You've heard people say it's a lot of hard work. You have to have a lot of compassion and patience and integrity. That sounds really corny and cliche, but it's so true. You have to do things right, and you can't rush through things to the point where you're doing it wrong just because you have a lot more stuff to do. You know, you have to have integrity and you have to have patience. You have to remember that that's real people that you're taking care of, and that's their life. Their quality of life kind of depends on you in some ways. You have to stay vigilant all the time and be aware of any changes in your patient, and that can be hard whenever you're running around trying to find another package of briefs, or you're trying to find washcloths or towels or gowns or whatever. Also, at the same time, you're trying to make sure that your patient is good. You know, that can be a lot and it can be really overwhelming. I will say, at least from my experience, hospitals, nursing homes, places that are more open to the public, that's a little more stressful as an aide. Whereas home health, that's a little bit less stressful. So you have a lot of options. Don't let that scare you, because eventually you get the hang of it and all that stress doesn't really get to you the same. Or, you know what? I'm a very stressed out person. I'm a very anxious person. I'm just very like, ooh, all the time. You may be completely different. You might find that you thrive in the stressful environment and you don't feel overwhelmed, and you just feel like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and this, and you know, you might never get that stressed out feeling. But speaking from someone who has crippling anxiety and everything overwhelms me, I'm telling you that you will get past that first stage of what the hell's going on, you know what I mean? Becoming a CNA while in college. Does being a CNA help in nursing school? Absolutely, like 100%. But is it required to do well in nursing school? No, absolutely not. It is not required to do well in nursing school. You learn a lot of things as a CNA that you will need for nursing school, or if you're doing anything medically when you're working with the general patient population. Things like patient care, vital signs, also just the general like interaction with you and the patient. That can be a little bit uncomfortable at first. I know for me, that was one of my biggest fears. It wasn't even some of the skills that we were doing. I was afraid to walk into that room, knock on the door, and say, "Hi, I'm Haley, I'm gonna be your aide today." That was terrifying to me. Like, I was like, what if I sound weird? Being an aide, I got that out of the way. You get the general like feel of things, if that makes sense. Whenever I first became an aide, turning someone in bed and also changing them if they had a brief on, that was hard for me. That was so hard. I'd put the brief on and then I'd turn them, and I would be too afraid to hurt them. I wouldn't turn them enough, or I felt like I wasn't at the right angle or whatever. And then the brief would end up crooked and I'd have to, redo it or get somebody to help me. That whole learning curve was done. Like, I already knew it by the time I got to nursing school because I got the hang of things as an aide. I hope I'm making sense. I feel like I'm making no sense. So all that babbling, what I'm trying to say is, because you already know those basic skills and you already have the basic feel of things, you can focus on other tasks and not have to worry about the more basic stuff. Let's say you're passing meds. Instead of worrying about how you're gonna sound on your introduction when you're knocking on the door telling them you're a nursing student, you can just focus on, okay, these are the steps that I'm gonna take while I'm passing their meds. Not, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? How am I gonna introduce myself? Am I gonna sound dumb? Clinical was definitely way easier because I had that experience as an aide. It gives you a huge advantage. There's no doubt there. So I'm talking about all the good things. I should probably talk about the bad things. Yes, it can be very stressful being an aide. It can be very mentally taxing. You have to see a lot of very hard things. Granted, if you're gonna be a nurse, you're gonna see those things anyway, but you know, you see people super sick, you see people dying, you see family members crying over their loved ones, and we can't just ignore the issue of some aides don't take care of their patients properly. Maybe you're too afraid to say something because they've been there longer, or you know, you have to deal with that moral conflict then. It's just like, there's a lot that goes into it, and that can be a lot during nursing school. The shifts are also very exhausting, in my opinion, literally exhausting. I cannot do anything after a shift. I have to go home, take a shower, and go to bed. All that being said, the bond that you make with the patients, just that like interaction with them makes it all worth it. But I still to this day remember the patients that I cared for. I loved them, they were so sweet. At the end of the day, it's completely subjective. So you shouldn't feel bad if you don't want to be an aide. You shouldn't feel bad if you do want to be an aide. It's completely up to you because you know yourself more than anyone. If you're unsure if you want to be a CNA, you could always just be a regular nurse aide first, see how you like that, or work somewhere else in a healthcare setting, somewhere a little bit less stressful, you know what I mean? But overall, I would 10 out of 10 recommend you be a CNA. My experience as an aide, I was a CNA a year before I ever went to nursing school. And again, like I said, it made nursing school so much less stressful. I felt so ahead of the game. I'm very flustered normally. I'm a very flustered person. Things stress me out. So having that weight off my shoulders of knowing I'm not going into something completely unfamiliar, that just made the whole experience way better. I don't know if I said this, I worked in a nursing home. So I was part-time and then I switched to casual eventually. And then eventually I decided to quit and work at a local hospital because the nursing home that I worked at was so far away. With school and work, it was just very stressful to have to drive that far. I worked the evening shift mostly, so I wouldn't get home until like midnight or later and had class the next day. It was just a lot. The pay wasn't as good as some places were paying, and also their casual requirements were just kind of a lot compared to what I feel like I could have had at another facility, if that makes sense. They still were requiring you to work a lot, and with school, I just figured I would rather work somewhere closer with more flexibility. Tips I have for anybody who is in the process of being an aide or is an aide already: don't be afraid to annoy people. If you need help transferring someone, if you need help because you just are unsure about something or you have a question, whatever it is, do not be afraid to ask. I do not care how nasty somebody's face looks. You ask them. It's better to be safe than sorry when it comes to having questions, or if you notice something on your patient that's like, I feel like that's not right, just ask. Because the worst that's gonna happen is the nurse might make you feel stupid for a minute, then that's it. But at least you said something, you know? And if somebody's gonna get mad at you for wanting to do your job properly, then that's on them. That's their problem. Also, when it comes to transferring patients, you are going to see, especially in understaffed places, a lot of people like to take shortcuts and transfer people themselves. Doing like one of the mechanical lifts that require 2 people, they'll do it by themselves. I don't care what anybody else is doing. If you see other people doing it, don't do it, because if something happens and somebody falls or somebody gets hurt, that's gonna be on you, and you can't use the excuse of, well, everybody else is doing it. So just do the right thing all the time. Coworkers, a lot of times you'll run into people who are not so friendly, a little bit salty, might give you some attitude. Don't let other people get to you. If you get annoyed with a patient and you find yourself wanting to take out your anger on the patient or yell at the patient or give attitude to them, just remember that you are in their home as a guest. That's where they live every single day. You get to leave and you get to go home and forget about it, but they are stuck there for however long. So just try to have some compassion in that sense, okay? Basically, to sum everything up, if you feel like you can work a couple shifts as a CNA and Still do well in school? Go for it. You can do anything that you set your mind to, literally. That is, I feel like I've said that in a couple of videos, but it's literally so true. Like, why do you think people go to the moon and stuff, you know? And also, have you seen those women who lift up cars because their baby's stuck under it? That should be proof to you. You can do anything. If you have any questions that I haven't answered, go ahead and leave them down below. If you have anything to add to what I've said, please leave it down below, because we all can benefit from each other. And I love to hear what you have to say, because I am just speaking from my experience. So if you have experience or know someone who had experience or whatever, go ahead and leave it down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am tired because I just talked for an hour and I feel like I made no sense, so I really hope that I did. But no, seriously, thank you for watching. And thank you for almost 650 subscribers. I love you. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope y'all are staying warm, unless you live in Florida or something like that. Then I'm jealous of you. I love you.
Things, but now when you're with her, I can see that